Good evening, everyone. My name is David Johnson, and I'm here tonight to facilitate a really great Authors Corner, and we're really glad you've joined us. This is the Icelandic National League of the United States' platform. We do webinars on all kinds of educational and interesting topics, and we occasionally host authors like we're doing tonight to talk about a new book that they may have written. We also teach Icelandic classes, language classes, and we just focus on all things Icelandic here in the United States to keep that cultural bridge alive. Many of us are descendants of Icelandic immigrants. Some of us are new residents here in the United States from Iceland, and others, like our author tonight, are just big fans of all things Icelandic. And I can't wait to start things off tonight by introducing Anne Hoekstra, who is tonight's author. She just recently released a book called Snorri Sturluson, The Tale Weaver of Iceland. And Anne comes to us from Minnesota tonight. Anne graduated with a degree in pharmacology from the University of Minnesota back in 2013 and has been doing some freelance artwork. Art was one of her passions growing up. And she's been to Iceland a few times. She'll talk about that a little bit, but she's not of Icelandic descent. She's just one of those really great lovers of all things Icelandic. So I'm going to turn it over to Anne right now to just give us a little bit more of a description of who she is and what brings her to this topic. Anne?
Sure. So I just love Iceland. I've been there 6 times, and I just fall in love with the area more and more every year. Every time I've been there, I've heard of Snorri, and you know, first time I heard about him, like, who is this guy? Did some research, and I've been hooked ever since. So it's just kind of a story to get children excited and involved with the history of Iceland, and to maybe make some future scholars to carry on the stories of Iceland in the future.
Very cool. So there's all kinds of great things to see in Iceland. What was it about Snorri that drew your attention? I mean, he was a pretty prominent figure back in the day, but there's a lot of other things to explore in Iceland. Why Snorri?
Well, I mean, his stories are just so lyrical. Feel like they're kind of funny, and they really bring in all of this history. And without Snorri, we would not know a lot about Norse mythology. So, I mean, those are kind of my favorite stories. I've been telling my son, he's only 2 years old, but we're still, talking about those stories nowadays. And if he didn't do such a good job of, collecting all of those stories and putting them in a great format, we wouldn't be telling those stories today. So he's really important, I think.
Yeah. So how do you take the important things that Snorri Sturluson did in his life and bring it down to a level that kids 5 to 10 years old, I think that's the age target for your book, understand? I mean, how do you make him come to life for children?
Sure. So I start his story out when he was really young. Kind of took out some creative license. There's some suspicion that he got all of these stories from a maternal grandmother. And so, starting out, where kids start out, hearing stories from their grandparents or their parents. And, as he grows up, he carries those stories with him, and, break it down into what a kid would see in the beginning, and, bring out the stories in ways that are exciting, and to give really good illustrations to kind of keep their imagination active.
I haven't had an opportunity yet to read the entire book, but I've seen snippets and pages of it. And what just grabs me and brings me in is the really wonderful illustrations. And I think that you are both the author and the illustrator.
That is correct. I did both the illustrations and the story. Started out with the story, and looked at some of my pictures that I took when I was in Iceland, and took some of those vistas and worked them into my art.
Yeah, the artwork is, to me, just really amazing. The perspective, you really tell an intimate story about a person in a family and the things that he did through his life, but you're giving illustrations that seem to really be on a mountaintop looking down over all of this beautiful landscape.
And I think that's what draws a lot of people to Iceland is the vistas. And, part of the story is to get kids interested in Iceland and to get a feeling for the country. So that's always been my impression is just, everything's bigger than life there. And so that's kind of how I try to make my illustrations is just have that wide view because everything just seems bigger and grander when I'm in Iceland.
Yeah. The colors seem really rich. And can you talk to us a little bit about how you create the illustrations? Are you using a certain medium?
Yeah, so when I first started art, it was just pen and paper. But I found out that when you work in a digital format, you have a lot more options. You have a lot more creativity. It's a lot easier to erase in a digital format than it is on a paper. Like if you put paint down, then it's permanent. But in a digital format, you can just hit the back button and it goes away. And I have a lot more options. I've experimented with a lot of things, and um, I I use kind of like a watercolor, oil painting inspiration. But have you ever seen oil painting prices? They're very expensive, so it's a lot easier to do in a digital format.
All right. Um, let's talk a little bit about some of the prior books that this isn't your first book, I don't believe, right?
No. I've done a few, just based off of places I've been or inspiring stories I've heard.
And there are messages in some of those books that I've understood. Maybe one message is about being courageous during World War II.
Yeah. I have a story about a Japanese diplomat who uh, made all of these visas for Jews in Lithuania, and they were stuck there, and they would have all been prosecuted and they would have gone to concentration camps if he didn't give them visas to get out of the country. And so he would tirelessly create these visas so they could get out of the country so they could save their lives. So he would, you know, throw them out his window every night just so people would have these visas. And he had explicit instructions from both the Japanese and the Lithuanian government not to do that. But, he knew that these people's lives were in danger. And so he spent hours every day writing, writing, writing. He would, work tirelessly. He wouldn't sleep. He had his children and his wife help him. That was an inspiring story. Or um, I've got some entries about Japanese culture and just, some amazing adventures you can do in Japan, taking that initiative to travel to explore outside of your comfort zone. So a lot of it is just exploring the world and opening up your perspective. And a lot of my art has kind of this very large vista view because I want people to take a wider view of the world.
Interesting. I assume that Japanese diplomat story is not into a children's book. Is it an adult book?
It is a children's book, actually.
Oh,
We don't
amazing.
really go much into the concentration camps or anything like that, but it's more of, he's going against orders. He's, taking initiative himself. He's making courageous acts, even though people are telling him not to do certain things.
So, what might be the overarching message of this book about Snorri? Is there like a moral punchline that you're hoping to drive through to younger readers today?
Yeah, I'm a giant book nerd. I feel like kids, when they first start out, having those books read to them as children, hearing stories from the adults around them, they're all really into books. But then, as kids get older, there's more competition with movies and social media. And I want them to keep that love of books, that love of storytelling, and just keep that wonder that you have as a kid and bring it forward and keep that love of books because, for example, if Snorri didn't have that passion and if he didn't bring that love of books from his childhood forward, we would never have the stories that we have today. So I just want to encourage kids to keep loving books for as long as they can and, spread that around the world to their own kids or to people that they know.
The world needs more book nerds, right?
Yep. Less
Yes.
TikTok, more books.
All right. I just want to take a little bit of a time out here from our conversation and let the folks that are listening in today to know that we would love to field your questions to Anne, probably down at the bottom of your screen, or if you're on a Mac or an iPad, it might be in some other location, but there's a Q&A button. You're welcome to add any questions there. And at the end, when we're kind of through our discussion here so far, we'll field your questions. So please type them in right now if you've got questions for Anne. Let's see. Talk to me a little bit about what it's like being an author trying to publish a book like this. The audience might seem kind of small, Iceland-ish, What did you encounter and what have you done to solve the problem?
Sure. So I've submitted this to a few publishers, but again, there wasn't a lot of interest because the overall population of Iceland isn't that large. But it's a story that I thought needed to be told. So I went ahead and learned self-publishing on Amazon, and actually it wasn't that hard. Once I did a few trials with the program, and I was able to publish it on demand on the Amazon self-publishing site. Um, and this way, I can show art to people. If I ever want to, um, give a gift to someone, or if I want to, tell a story to someone, I'll just send them this book. It's really a way for people to get stories out there, even if you might not have as large of an audience. It gives you an opportunity to spread your story and, send out that publication to people as you can.
And basically not take no for an answer.
Right.
I want this book out there. I'm going to make it happen.
And I feel like it's getting harder and harder nowadays to publish books because there's fewer and fewer publishing houses out there. So I think self-publishing kind of is the new hot thing out there.
Yeah. Well, one of the nice things that I love about your book too is that you've made it bilingual. On each page, the story is told in both English and Icelandic. And for those people like me that are learning Icelandic, it's nice to see that side by side per page thing. So I can see the grammar at play in Icelandic and be able to easily understand what's going on contextually in the text.
And so I will not take credit for that. That is a friend that was able to translate that for me. So that was her Christmas gift to me, was to translate that text for me. She studied Icelandic as her undergraduate degree, and so she wanted to take a stab at it. It helped her like refresh her skills as well, because it's been a long time since she's written something in Icelandic. So this was one of the best Christmas gifts I could have ever gotten.
Wonderful. Great. I know our Icelandic reading group might actually even want to get this book. So I'm hoping a lot of people will pick it up, not only for themselves as adults to kind of learn the language, but also for kids and grandkids for Christmas. I think it would make a wonderful book for them. Obviously, if people want to buy your book, it's available through Amazon.com, but Snorri Sturluson is kind of an odd name that we might not spell correctly. How can we get to that page where your book is available for purchase?
So I just would put in Snorri, Snorri, under Anne Hoekstra. Google that, or I will put a link. We have a link in the meeting invite, don't we? To the Amazon. Like,
I think it's going to be in our INLUS newsletter comes out here in the next few days, and there's going to be an article about you and your book in there with a link directly to Amazon.com. So it's available there. I was just thinking if you can kind of remember the tail weaver, tail dash weaver, um, those keywords would get you to the book too, for sure.
excellent. Thank you.
Um, Anything else you want to just tell us about your process or about the book, your love
Um,
of Iceland?
I love hot springs. That is also, I've talked about a few Japanese books that I've written as well. That's kind of a unifying theme why I love places is because of hot springs or kind of the spa culture. So I would think that both Iceland and Japan have one of those unique hot spring spa cultures that you don't see in much of the world. So when I first started traveling in college, I actually just kind of did a stopover in Iceland, and I actually liked it way more than the original destination of Norway. That's kind of how I got hooked. I went to Blue Lagoon, started the whole spa package, and here I am, um, addicted to Iceland now from that.
You plan to go back? You said you've been there
Oh,
6 times?
yeah, I'm gonna go back. Maybe I just went this April, so I'm gonna probably go again in maybe a year or two. It's I've got to take I've taken, three of my friends, I've taken my mom, I've taken my sister. So I'm gonna take my son when he gets a little bit older.
Well, let's get back to the namesake of the book, Snorri. You've really had to analyze his life from beginning to end. He did some great things. He was a politician. He was a poet. He was a historian. What would you say is the highlight of his life, maybe in a less known way? What are some of the things that really intrigue you about his life?
Um, I mean, it's the fact that he was a poet on top of everything. I feel like um a lot of people don't really talk about how, the Eddas, yes, they're a historical document, but he's more of a poet than anything else, I would say. More of a lyricist than a historian, I feel like. I feel like that was always his intent, was to make things artistic, not just historical. He wanted to make beautiful works of art, not just, spitting out historical references on a page. And that's why they've had so much lasting power, is he's actually an artist rather than just a historian.
Well, excellent. Any questions from the audience? I don't see any in our queue. So, any last minute questions from the audience?
I will say that if anyone is in Iceland, I've gotten a lot of references from City Walk tours. So they're a historical tour group in Iceland. They're a free tour that you can take there, and they are a wonderful resource, a wonderful uh, tour group if you ever are interested in them.
There actually is a question that's come through, so let me just read it real quick. This person says, "Thank you so much for your work, Anne. I would love to hear your connection to Lithuania. That is, how did you get interested in Lithuania and or the story you wrote about Lithuanian history? And are there any spa connections there?"
Um, no, there are no spa connections there. Um, but actually, we had a speaker come in. They were a Holocaust survivor, and they had a connection to that Lithuanian Japanese ambassador, and they told us the story of how they were rescued by that ambassador by the travel pass they were given. And so I was very young at the time, so I don't remember the name of the survivor, but the story stuck with me. And so it's something I learned in fourth grade, and I'm still remembering today in my 30s.
And then the question goes on like one layer further. Do you see any connections? This person loves to travel, obviously. Do you see connections with the cultures of Lithuania and Iceland in any way? They're both smallish countries, aren't
So
they?
yeah, both smallish countries. You know, from my I've reached out to the Sugihara house in Lithuania, and I was able to get some historical reference material from them. And I've done some other books where I've tried to get information for research. And in Lithuania, just like with Iceland, people are much more accessible. Um, it's almost like a small town, just like Iceland is. Like everyone's willing to talk to you, help you out. I haven't encountered that in a few other countries where I've tried to do research for books. I've tried, larger countries like France and England, and it's really hard to get a hold of people to help you with research. But in Iceland and Lithuania, it was very easy because these people kind of have that small town, down to earth feel.
Okay. Here's another good question. It's about your future plans for books. And is there perhaps another Icelandic figure that you've encountered that piques your interest enough to consider a book?
There are a lot of them. Does anyone have any suggestions? I'd be willing for anyone to email me with any good ideas. There are a lot, but I don't have anyone in mind yet. I am working on a book about Icelandic horses right now.
Oh,
So,
wow. What is it about the horse that intrigues you so?
the fact that they're only found in Iceland, that the minute that that horse is exported outside of the country, they're no longer allowed back in Iceland. And the fact that they have a unique trot, like horses are kind of pre-programmed with certain types of gaits and trots, and the Icelandic horse has a unique style of trotting that is only seen in Iceland. And these horses are very robust. They can handle harsh winters. They're just a unique organism, something that I haven't really seen elsewhere. So I just recently did an Icelandic horse tour in my tour uh, to Iceland in April. So that inspired me to write the book.
Interestingly enough, there were two questions that came in from two different people that helped solve a problem. One woman wants to know if this book is available at a bookstore in the Minneapolis, St. Paul area. Well, you're only self-publishing through Amazon, so
Correct.
it's not available like in hard copy bookstores. But another person says you may mention that for Minneapolis folks, you and your books will be at the Hekla Club, which is an Icelandic club that's been around for over 100 years, on the third Saturday in February. So you'll be signing books, perhaps.
Yes. So I will
Okay.
be around. Yeah.
So you'll have some hard copy books in a box and
Yep.
you can sell them there and buy them there.
Yep.
Fabulous. Those lucky people in Minneapolis. And another question came through. Do you consider yourself a children's author or do you foresee writing for other ages at some point?
To tell you the truth, my favorite part is the art part. So I do like children's books the most, but I don't put it past myself to make a Icelandic murder mystery. I am a big fan of those books. So I've thought about that one. I do have a story in the back of my mind, but I do enjoy the illustrations the most. So that's where my main focus will be. But I wouldn't put it past myself to make a potential murder mystery coming up.
Okay, so who is your favorite Icelandic author these days? Might be a murder mystery writer or something else.
Um, To tell you the truth, it's still going to be Snorri.
Okay,
It's,
it's your favorite
yeah,
author?
yeah.
All right, okay. Well, I think we've exhausted all the questions out of the queue. I want to thank you so much for your time tonight and sharing your talent, your writing talent and your visual graphic talent. It's amazing. And I just encourage everybody hearing this to support Anne and buy one of her books for Christmas, buy several. I think they'd really make great gifts for, kids in that target 5 to 10-year-old range, but it would be great to put in anybody's personal library too. It's a great book.
And I wanted to thank David and Douglas for helping facilitate this conversation. You guys have been wonderful. And thank you everyone for coming and looking at my book. It's been a pleasure. And you guys are the nicest group of folks I've met in a long time. So thank you.
Well, thanks for that thumbs up. We try really hard. And I just want to encourage everybody that's listening too, if you're not a member of the Icelandic National League of the United States, why don't you consider a $25 a year membership? It helps sustain us, keeps this work going. And Doug has recorded tonight's session, so it'll be available on our YouTube channel in a couple of days. Thank you, everybody, and have a great evening. Go the note.
Thanks, everybody.